This last tutorial on curtains is going to deal with curtains that aren't just plain like this red one we see on the screen now. We're going to have a curtain with patterns on it. So you can have all kinds of little boats or whatever it is that you want your curtains to have. The technique will be the same. I'm going to use something a little more intricate, and that is the actual weave of the fabric. It is a pattern that we created. The tutorial for that exists elsewhere in this set. Right now what we're going to do is open up the file that we have for our texture. And there's the weave of the fabric right there. It's in its own layer, transparent layer. So I'm going to go in there and select this whole thing. Now, I've made it quite large. This file is much larger than all the other files I'm working on because it gave me the ability to create a nice intricate looking fabric, as you can see right there. But when I bring it into the other files, if it's the same size, then the weave is going to be really big. It's not going to really look like fabric. It's going to look more like a cane or something that you wouldn't have on a curtain. So I created a very large file that I filled with the pattern. So I'm going to select all, and I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go back to my little curtain file. Here's my little curtains. And I'm going to paste it right off the top there. I'm going to say paste. And it's going to paste it in. Now you can see how large it is. It's quite large. So I'm going to pull back and then shrink it down to the size of the curtains themselves. That should be enough of a scaling so that I can really get the texture that I want. So I'm going to bring it way down, about like that. Click OK. Let's zoom in on it just to see how it looks. And that's pretty good. Now you notice how we've lost a lot of that detail? It's okay. All we need is just the sense of it being a fabric. When it's this far away, you don't really see those little differences in the threads and so on. You're just going to see the basic weave. So I'm going to set some modes for this. So it's going to give me the effect that I want. So let's see what multiply will do. That gives me a nice little effect right there. So I kind of see the fabric. I could try a little overlay, which kind of lightens it up. But I'll tell you what, multiply is going to be good. So there's the basic shape, right? Now, I'm going to cover 3 areas right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down so that I only see the part that I want. I'm going to just get rid of this little piece right here of that fabric layer and cut this little piece right there like that. And then I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to take this and duplicate it over the other 2 sections. So I bring it over here, right there. And you know what? I'm only going to do it to 2 so we can just see what's going to happen here. So now, I'm going to go in there and give this a mask. Let's just bring it down right here below this so that the edge doesn't have the fabric there. And I have a mask here for those folds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to option, click and drag the mask right over this guy. And there we see the weave only inside that area. There's exactly the way we want it. So now I have to go in there and distort this weave so it's not straight across because the fabric itself has got a little curve to it. So I need to distort the weave so it's going to do the same thing. I want to work on each side separately, so I'm going to actually select this side of my fabric right there. Now I'm going to get a little closer to it so I can see what I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to go in there and give that a warp. Now, puppet warp can work if there are other little dents in the fabric, as you'll see in another tutorial when we talk about actual fabrics. But in this particular case, the curtains are just flowing straight down, so warp is going to do a much better job. So one thing I want to do first is to go in there and tighten up these sides here. So I'm going to go in there and just pull this in. So I have a nice little effect there, and I'm playing with the mask. You see that? So let's undo that and make sure we're in that layer. Now this happens a lot when you create a mask and you're in that mask and then you go to do something and you realize you're doing it to the mask. You don't want to do it to the mask. You want to do it just to the object itself. And you quickly will see when you're doing something wrong because, like we saw there, the fabric was left back here and things got distorted in a weird way. So now I'm going to go in there and say warp. So I'm going to bring this side in. And I'm going to take this guy over. I don't want to see those marching ants, so let's get rid of that right off the bat. Don't want to see those things. Now, by doing this, I'm tightening the side right there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to bring these guys in. I'm going to push this guy back out. Now, what's happening here is that I'm making the sides get a little tighter. And that's going to make it look like this fabric is moving around. It's folding around. The same thing is going to happen on this side. I'm going to pull this in, pull this guy back out, tighten this in, and you can kind of see it almost in the preview that's starting to happen. I'm going to pull this in, tighten this up, and then pull this guy back out. And you can see how it's tightening up in that area. There you go. That's the way I want it. I'm going to click OK and have that happen. There you can see how it's starting to wrap around. Now, I'm going to apply another warp. I want these as individual warps, so I'm just going to grab this edge right here again and go in and say warp it again. Now I'm going to kind of follow the shape of my fabric here by grabbing this handle and just kind of pulling it down. Just like that. And there we can see, and again, those guys will appear, so let's just turn them off. There we go. And I'm going to just kind of bring this down and then bring it up so that we get outside of that area. There we go, just in there. And now we can see how the fabric is starting to get this little bow in there like that. And there we can see how the fabric is now starting to follow that flow. Needs a little curvature on this side. I'm going to go beyond the area. And I'm just going to kind of slowly bring this area down. So again, another warp, in which I will just bring this up just a little bit, and bring this down. So I just start to get this little curve on that side. And I'm starting to get this nice little bow to it. Now, when I'm done with all this, I would create a second layer, which I would then put into the back areas and then do it the opposite way. They're bowing this way. And so I start to create this little weave to my fabric. As you can see, it's just following this little curvature of my fabric and creating the effect that you want instead of straight across. So it starts to conform to the shape of the folds in the fabric. Any kind of little boats or whatever would take on that same shape where it's just starting to follow the folds. So it's a question of warping it and getting the effect that you want.